So we have with us uh, Prabir Purkayastha, founder editor of the NewsClick and renowned journalist. He has made his own space in the digital media space in India, and we are very happy to have you here. Welcome, sir, to to have a discussion about the happenings in the country today. A hearty welcome to Kerala. So, do you have any kind of memories or reflections about the state of Kerala?
Well, I've been here a number of times. I was also on the committee for planning Kerala's, for instance, energy policy. So there was planning board had a committee, so I co-chaired that committee. You have placed me as a journalist, which is what I am in my current avatar, but I have been an engineering professional for a very long time. And I was involved with the energy sector, particularly with control systems, computer controls, and in general using computers for various other things. So in fact, that is how I came to also digital media. That's where I really came to. But as I said, my relationship with Kerala, also with the planning board, has been a long one. So I, of course, have fond memories of Kerala whenever I come to. Particularly its greenery, and I come from Bengal originally. So Kerala has rains, have, the kind of vegetation you have, very similar. So I have a special empathy whenever I come to Kerala, and I feel, okay, I'm at home.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So, you have mentioned in your memoirs that you have been an avid reader in your childhood. And you have been continuing, you have been an avid reader throughout your life. So, how has that reading habit evolved over time?
Well, I fell in love with books very early, partly because I had a fairly lonely childhood. I was carted with my parents everywhere. So I really did not have the kind of normal, friend circuit which you have as young kids, in the area that you are in the schools that you are in, because I was sort of changing it every 2 years.
Yes.
So therefore, my love of books really had also something to do with that. They were my constant companions, as it were. So I used to read a lot, and I became an avid reader. I used to go to libraries very young, borrow books from there, and read a fair amount.
How that remained in the same manner, or have you changed into digital? What is the change that has technology brought in?
I would consider the format to be important, whether it's on paper, whether it is on computer, it's on a tablet. How does it matter? Ultimately, it's the story you read, the narrative you read, what the book is telling you that you read. Whether in the paper format or digital format, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Digital format is an advantage. You can carry your library with you.
Okay? Yes.
So that's the advantage you have. It's a small device. But if you have to carry that many number of books, then it's difficult. But books still have a value. So whatever books I think I find interesting, I would like to have them in paper as well. Because then it's a different way of reading the same book, which you don't get if you're reading it electronically. But if I don't know the book, then I would like to get it perhaps in electronic form first. It's cheaper, it's easy to scan through very quickly. But those which are of, shall I say, greater importance to me intellectually or otherwise, those books I really then would buy and keep it in my library.
That print form is important still.
I think it still is. They perform different functions. You can go from different parts of the print book more easily than you go in the electronic book. So, and also you read it differently. So I think that is important. That how you read books. I started reading print books, obviously paper books. So therefore, my love of the format is still paper. Okay. But yes, the convenience of being able to carry your library, of course, makes a difference.
That's okay. And in this context about digital media, it has often been accused that it has reduced the attention span of the people. People are addicted to the reels culture, a 30-second reel. So somehow it affects the reading culture. What is your take on it?
I think it does both. It does provide instant gratification, instant information, and also quite often misleading information because you tend to find easy answers. It also reduces, as people would say, the attention span.
Yeah.
That you want the answer in 2 minutes. But I think it does different things to different people. So I think those people who want easy answers would have been perhaps satisfied with easy answers anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Those who want to go deeper would want to go deeper anyway.
Okay.
So I think a lot of it is how you interact with society, how you interact with information, and how much you take on face value, and how much are you willing to look beyond the simple answer you have been given, as if every answer is a mathematical one. 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Well, that's a tautology. You know, that's, yes, it's a fact, but it doesn't tell us much.
Yeah.
But the deeper questions have various answers. The question is, what is the answer that you are satisfied with? Depends on how you look at the world, and therefore how you look at the context of the question itself. So yes, it also assumes people have simple needs and simple answers. You Google and you believe that is the answer. But it also makes it, for those who want to know, a starting point. So I think it depends more of how we are educated in digital terms today. That is the issue. You know, every format when it first comes has the problem. Okay? So when you have, for example, paper, written text, I'm sure people said this is not real. Real is voice. Okay. You have to learn from the guru.
Exactly.
Okay. This paper is, what does it tell you? It's very superficial. So now we have reached the next level of superficiality. You can get an answer in 2 minutes. So you don't even get the texture of the paper. But nevertheless, as I said, I think it's how society and how we as individuals, we really shape what we need from the format, from the platforms that we have. And it is really that ability to think beyond the simple question and answer that differentiates the superficial answers from the deeper answers.
But in this era, we cannot ignore that digital media. The very reason for you starting NewsClick, you have told it earlier also, that for talking to the new generation, you need to take up, to the digital form. So, so that means, and sometimes this era has been called the era of images, where images and videos they take place. So, so that is.
So I wasn't really looking for the digital form. I realized that early on that if we did not start the video as also a mode of communication, then we would lose the next generation. You see, our generation was brought up on the newspaper. I'm mid-70s, okay? So we didn't have any access to information except radio, that was news, and newspaper. The next generation, particularly the generation today, came up on television. Okay, they were the ones who took their news visually. Okay, so television was the big break, transferring news from print to visual form. And I think what the video form does, which is that it makes it accessible to everyone, by which you can choose what you want and you can see what the things that you want. So this active seeking of information, not just what the television gives you, is what made your generation different from ours, or different from the middle generation as well, because I'm really one more generation removed from you. So I think that was what I was seeking at that point. I felt that we are entering an era where the video form would become more important. And therefore I wanted its progressive news organization should look at exploring the video format and use that also in the news. And therefore when you go to movements, you can capture what the movement people are saying, not only what is being said from the stage, but also from the field. So you would actually have to then, not you actually have to, but you have the ability then to interview not only what the leaders are saying, but those who have come to listen across marched long distances. What are they saying? What are their experiences? Why are they here? So we captured, for instance, the March, Kisan March, which, for instance, went from Nashik to Bombay. So we captured that in NewsClick. We also looked at how the Kisan peasant organizations that went to Sikar, and they had their various actions that they took. So all of this we were trying to capture not only what was being said by the leaders, but also those who had come to listen and who had come from long distances. So that was the story for us. So this is something which the video as a medium is much more lively, much more appealing than something that you could write as a dry story. Of course, stories are also important because it's a different form. So you have to write the text as well. But these two complement each other. But what I felt was, when I started NewsClick in 2009, that what was important for NewsClick from the beginning was the video as a format.
It was quite a far-sighted move as things turn out today. And it is a commendable achievement that you have more than 4 million subscribers in YouTube.
Well, at the moment, NewsClick is virtually not shut down, but is really not be able to produce much content because, as you know, the various cases against us and our income tax, the income tax department has virtually seized our accounts, so we're not able to pay people. But yes, NewsClick had built up, as you said, 4 million subscriber base on YouTube, and it certainly had a bandwidth. But what I really am proud of, what my people did, not I, what my people did, is that we captured what the people on the ground were saying and gave them a voice, which is what our intention was. It's not so much how many subscribers and so on, which is of course important, because subscribers also have a star value, meaning that if you have stars, then yes, your subscribers increase. But the kind of movements we've covered at different points of time, Dalit movement, women's movement, workers' movements, Kisan movement, I think that's what I'm really proud of.
At the same time, if you look at the online other media portals which are surviving, not necessarily in a progressive, modest fashion, but using for clickbaiting and other things, you have put up an alternate model. That is even kind of surprising that you manage to survive in that in that economy of extreme clickbaiting and other things. So online media is because it's a free for all kind of situation right now.
Yeah, but there'll be always clickbait newspapers, clickbait television channels, clickbait media of this kind, digital platforms. I think there have always been this kind of things. I remember television channels which had crime shows, and the anchor appeared to be also one of them. Okay? So it was meant to be that. So there are channels which talk about various miracles, okay, all kinds of things. The clickbait, extreme clickbait, will be to talk about
ghosts and all coming. No?
Ghosts, of course, but also things like Loch Ness Monster. There's so many things you can make Cage, sensational stuff. So that's one part of it, and that's definitely a part of media, whether it's print, television, or it is digital platforms. The question is, what is the specific stance that you have? And I said, our stance was not to tell them what people should think, but to bring them close to what movements were doing, what they're saying, and not just the leadership of the movements, but the people who are coming to these movements. And I think that is what distinguished NewsClick. And the second part of it is that you don't editorialize, you tell the story in a way that you, of course, choose the right story, but you let the people then tell the story, and you don't speak for them. So I think those are some of the rules that we tried to follow. How much successfully, don't know, but it was certainly an experiment worth
Definitely
doing.
it was, yeah.
And I think that in that sense, the ability to do that, that we had that ability to do that, we did do it for about almost 14, 15 years. So yes, how much longer we will be able to do it is an open question, which is now going to be seen what the courts do, for instance, regarding our cases, which are income tax and others. And we'll see, we'll continue to see how we can take this forward. But I'm happy that we did something which had an impact, and it also created, hopefully, other people who would take this forward.
Exactly.
So not
These
necessarily
movements
we have
were
to do it.
brought to the, I think the mainstream media was also forced to report, once such things came up, about, especially about Kisan movement and all. That you have played a very significant role. I think NewsClick has played a very significant role, bringing it to the, maybe that explains the kind of,
attack.
Yeah.
The thing is also that what is the viewpoint you give in this media? Look at it this way. When the workers come on the streets, say of Delhi, they're coming from different parts of the country, they march through Delhi and they have a big meeting somewhere in Delhi. How do the newspapers cover it? They will say traffic jams took place because workers were on the streets, they did not let vehicles go. The huge traffic jam in Delhi. That's their headline. Not why lakhs of workers are in the city. What are the distance they've come from? What are their demands? Who are these people? None of that. So it is from the viewpoint of a person sitting in a car who is facing a traffic jam.
Exactly.
So that is their audience. Now, why is it that the audience? Because ultimately the newspaper also has to sell advertisements. As Times of India, one of the owners, directors said that we are not in news business, we are in the business of advertisement. Okay? So that is the issue, that who are they, what is their news for? For a certain kind of people who can buy goods which will be sold to the advertisements. That's why I think Sainath once wrote that Bombay has 40 news journalists covering fashion and only covering one person, one journalist covering farmers across Maharashtra. So that's the difference. Farmers don't buy, okay?
Yes.
But the middle class does.
Yeah.
Therefore, fashion.
Yeah.
Therefore, selling the various fashion accessories and so on, which is where the revenue comes from for the newspaper, advertisements.
So this argument is also there that if you really want to have a free newspaper, then you should pay for it. How do you think about it?
Well, the point again is, if a newspaper is going to cost 20 rupees per issue, and someone is going to give it to you 1 rupee and gives you the news also, 80%, 90%, then what do you do? So these are not easy questions to answer. The answer really lies in that media needs to be socially supported. And that was something which came up very early. That, for instance, in television, that it should be public television, not private and advertisement-driven television. Can it be people's control? Can it be asserted on television? These arguments came up much earlier. But over a period of time, it has come to private capital as the best way forward for media. It's been the argument, not the state. And yes, state-controlled media also has problems, as we know. We have only to see what the state-controlled media today does. So these are difficult questions to answer, no easy answers. But at the same time, there is no question that if profit motive is the primary motive of news organizations, then what they will get is news for whom? And therefore, if it is news for those who can buy, then it is then of only that class that then the newspaper will focus on. And I think that's where the problem lies. So it's a much bigger social problem. But yes, we were lucky that we could work for 15 years and we did bring to the table, bring to the viewers that you can cover movements and you can cover the people in the movements, and there is an audience for that.
So talking about the movements, how do you assess the international or national situation as far as progressive and left movements are concerned? Like earlier we used to say that there is no alternative, TINA. That debate is going back now. Like globalization is also facing challenges, Brexit is coming. But at the same time, even in Western liberal democracies, you are finding a huge rise, alarming rise of xenophobic, politics. Right wing is strengthening, even in France. Like, you can find that. So, how do you assess the situation, and what about the future, of that politics?
You see, I'm not going to be providing prophetic voice about what's going to happen in the future. But let's take one thing which is very clear, that somewhere in the 16th, 17th century, a few Western countries in Europe started their colonial empires, which included India as well. The British was the biggest one, and was in three continents, which is the Americas, Africa, and Asia. They had colonies. The United States, what is United States today, but over the entire Americas, they wiped out virtually the indigenous population, and really, in order to bring labor, then they introduced slaves from Africa. So Africa was destroyed through slavery. Americas, there was genocide. But in countries which had earlier a much longer history and economic strength, they became colonies, which is what India, semi-colony China, this was Southeast Asia. All this colonization did not destroy or did not bring slavery here, though there was bonded labor and so on, but did not bring slavery. Neither was genocide possible, because this was seen as a place from where they could squeeze money. So these colonial empires have fallen in the 20th century. In the 21st century, the last hegemon of the world, the United States, it thought it could lead the ex-colonial powers over the world and control it, particularly after the fall of Soviet Union. Now it's clear that is not possible. That you will see, whether you call it the BRICS, you call it what used to call the non-aligned movement, but you can see Africa, Asia, most countries, Latin America, most countries are not going with the United States. Even on the issue of the Ukraine war, Gaza, what's happening today, they are not with the United States. And the United States is using its dollar hegemony to try and bend other countries to its desires or rule. But the whole idea that US will be the next Rome, it will rule for 200 years over the world, has already fallen in 20 years. That dream of the United States over. So you have Western ex-colonial powers in a crisis. And the Brexit is a classic example of that, you know. So will they come together as European Union, get more heft, more bigger economy and so on, or survive as individual countries? And can they get back their glory? So what you talk of the right-wing shift is the belief immigrants are the problem. Not that they are in a crisis of a different kind. They are crisis that they are no longer able to fleece the third world of money. France, even today, has large parts of Africa as a neo-colony. As neo-colonies. So all those things, when they are weakening, and it is true that objectively, China and India are becoming much bigger economies. Brazil in Latin America. So all this is changing the economic structure of the world. And that is reflected also in the rise of the right in Europe that you see, or in the United States, when they believe that if they did more of saber waving, more guns, more sanctions, they can still rule the world. And I think that is the real crisis they are facing. Earlier they used to say free world versus communism. Now that's also not there. But the same issue continues. How do you control the countries which were ex-colonies, who were once colonies? And that was the 20th century, was really decolonization. And I think that battle is occurring in different forms. Even those countries, like for instance, our country, India, Mr. Modi, he was much more West-centric when he took power. But the objective reality of India was that you might have a conflict with China, but they're still your largest trading partner. You have apparently a strategic understanding with the United States. But when it comes to economic issues, they are trying to exploit you as much as they can.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all these issues are also there. And I think that contradiction has not gone away. So I think we are seeing really 21st century as a century where the ex-colonial powers are dwindling. And that's the angst you see which promotes this kind of right-wing forces who think the problem is immigrants. That's all, nothing else. And that's what, explains the xenophobia that you see in Europe today.
But that is, when you compare it with the 1970s, like 1970s used to be a very hopeful decade, like revolutionary movements, progressive eruptions were happening across the world. There was a lot of hope, like anti-Vietnam movements and all. And you were also politically very active at that time. And you must have had a certain point of view about the world at that time, about the transformation, that belief that some sudden transformation might come. It must have been there. So what has happened to that goal? Like, has it changed, or are you still...
Well, I believe the goals remain the same. We thought it was much nearer than it is today. Okay, so you are coming in a period where the left socialist vision appears to be weak. But let's see that capitalist crisis and the crisis of ideology of capital is also there. It's not only the crisis of the left. Social democracy in Europe is virtually over. What used to be considered the democratic forces over there are now going towards Mr. Trump, going towards Mr. Biden is not much better. Okay, and you are seeing that today, right now, what's happening in Gaza. Then you have England, which has gone to the right, and yet they still want to go further to the right. And of course, you have the AFD in Germany, you have Marine Le Pen in France. So you are seeing a crisis of ideology, which is of both the left as well as what would be called the liberal democracies at one point of time. So yes, it looks more bleak at the moment for everybody, it seems. But I am going to say that the objective crisis of capital is what is going to bring about a change. And that objective crisis of capital is not going to be straightforward that capitalist countries, advanced capitalist countries will go to socialism. What we're seeing is the breakup of the economic order which was ruled by colonial and ex-colonial powers or settler colonial powers, United States being a settler colonial power, that their power is now really shrinking. And this battle is still the battle of a decolonization of the world, from which we have to see how socialist forces can emerge.
Okay. So you are saying that liberal democracy is also in trouble, and so this going to be this is a kind of a transitionary phase, even though we are, that is what you are...
I'm saying all political forces of the 20th century, which brought hope, liberal democracy for those who believed in it, social democracy for those who believed in it, for the communists who believed in a total transformation of society. All three had some emancipatory vision. They had a vision that this will solve the problems. All three are in a crisis. So I'm only saying don't look at only the fact that the communists are in crisis. It's also social democracy. Where is social democracy in Europe? It's in crisis. What about liberal democracy? Those who said, we are the liberal democracies, we will give basic benefits to the people, and yet we'll keep capitalism. But we'll make the people, give them at least guarantees of some kind and so on.
They are also in crisis.
That has also gone with Margaret Thatcher as well as Ronald Reagan. That is also gone. So what you have is what would be called the stern, crude face of capitalism, which is now in front of us. So how do you fight it? That is the challenge.
So in that context, can you say, like, for example, neoliberal policies, that it's also argued that neoliberal policies accentuate the social inequality and thus they promote this right-wing transformation.
Well, that's really where it comes from, and it was presented that state is the problem. And you see, if you take liberal democracy or social democracy or the communist, all three believe that state should be used to solve these problems. Problems of inequality, at least basic minimum human conditions to be there, education, medicine. So even liberal democracy accepted that these emancipatory values had to be pushed. That's what the supposed New Deal, all of it was.
Yeah.
So even that falls with Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher. So you can see that forget the crisis only of the communists for a minute and think about the crisis of liberal democracy. So at the core of liberal democracy today, the US, France, Germany, England, Italy, you see forces rise who basically are quasi-fascist. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. Racism and extreme right-wing ideology, when it combines, what you're getting is really a kind of fascism operating within a democratic, supposedly democratic structure because there are elections. It's not very different here. It's not very different in a number of countries. So yes, the world seems to be in a stage of crisis where the emancipatory dreams of all of these, and in India and in ex-colonial countries, national liberation struggles, also was that it will provide benefit to the people. So we have a generic crisis which is much deeper than one of the left. And I think that's the journey which I foresee, that near future, sooner rather than later, this crisis is going to give birth to new order in which the politics of the left, we have also to rethink a lot of the things we have talked about. Okay, so I'm not going to say the crisis is not real. There is a crisis of the left, there is a crisis of
that was what I really wanted to come to. Like, what about that thing? Like, today many people, especially after the elections, that the electoral debacle was the left front has faced in Kerala also. There's a lot of criticism, internal criticisms, external criticisms about what the left should be doing, what have gone wrong. Is Marxism still relevant? What is it to be a Marxist today? So, how do you?
Well, you see, as long capitalism exists, the question for me is answered. That yes, Marxism is relevant. Marxism is not formulas; it's tools to understand capitalism and what's happening in our societies. We have to be creative, yes. We have to be creative in finding new solutions, new way of presenting our ideas, addressing what are the central contradictions of the epoch, not talking about the contradictions which existed earlier. So, as Lenin said, concrete analysis of concrete conditions is the heart of dialectics. So, we have to be dialectical in our thinking, not giving formulas which are lazy, okay? But addressing what are our problems. If we take, for instance, I'll give you a very simple example. Right now, we have the Kuwait debacle that has taken place. Workers have died in a fire over there. We can take it as an accident, but let's analyze it a little more. India's largest foreign exchange earnings is from the money that is sent by our migrant workers who go abroad, work and send back their money here. This is the largest component of India's foreign exchange earnings. What do we do for them as a state? Does India see that those who are sending this foreign exchange back, they have minimum protection where they go and work? Instead of that, we are happy to sacrifice those workers for money that we get. But we are not doing anything to protect them. Now, this is an issue that we need to raise within the country. Right now, this is the Kuwait fire is a horrific case of what has happened. But it's a much larger issue of the legal rights of the workers who are going as migrants and who protects them. If they're sending money here, it's Indian state responsibility to provide minimum protection to them, which we don't do. Indian government does not interfere in the legal rights, the workers' rights, where virtually they have no rights when they go to work in the Gulf or other places. So these are questions, new questions the left has to raise. And I think, as I said, the Kerala issue is at the center of it because a huge number of people from Kerala go and work in West Asia.
The health minister of Kerala, she was denied a chance to go to Kuwait. Even though
But this is an internal issue we have to raise with our government. What are you doing? What are you doing to protect these migrant workers who are giving you in the Indian state foreign exchange?
Exactly.
And that's how your foreign exchange balance is healthy.
Yeah.
So this has to be raised not as an issue with Kuwait, but issue with our government. What are you doing to protect them? And we saw it, for instance, when the Olympic football World Cup was being held in, where was it held? Qatar.
Yeah. Qatar.
Was it held? Qatar, no? We have seen it recently when the World Cup was being held in Qatar, and there was stadiums which had been built, and workers died over there in large numbers. There were criticism from various places, but did the Indian government do anything about it? No. So we are willing to send our workers into near slavery conditions. Yes, they are poor, so they are willing to go and take that risk. But what is the responsibility of the state to protect those workers? And from Kerala, it's a huge issue because there is such a large number of workers who are going there. So these are the new ways we have to think, what are workers' rights? Not just simple worker rights here, but also workers' rights from the migrant worker. So I think those are the kind of issues also we need to raise. So as I said, the task of the Marxist is to analyze what are the concrete conditions you have, and based on that, what are the concrete actions and line that you have to take. And if you don't think afresh, that, and this is the problem I'm going to lay to your generation. We have done our bit, good or for bad. Now it's your generation which is to take up the challenge of bringing in new thought, and every generation has to do it for itself.
Definitely. That's very true that creatively we have to think about the current situation. But talking about the past, how your generation, have you underestimated the weight of traditions, the power which traditions might have over the society? You yourself have referred in your memoir, like you have made an interesting comparison between achar and achar, like both are transferred to the, both are transferred to the generations in a kind of values are transferred. So right wing definitely have an advantage, from this, they have an, so how we, and have you made any kind of,
I am not going to say right wing is an advantage. Yes and no. After all, for a long time, the BJP was untouchable in Indian politics simply because they had played no role in the freedom movement, and their only contribution after that was the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. And we all know, whatever they might pay lip service to, they really hated Gandhi. Mainly because he used the language of religion, and therefore he was able to mobilize the people for the national movement. While BJP, at that time Johnson, they used the idiom of religion, but they didn't want people to come into the struggle against the British. Their target was always minorities in India, the Muslims, that they are fighting something which is 200 years behind. They are not prepared to fight the enemy then. So that is why they were nowhere there in the picture. So it's a failure in that sense of the Congress, of the parties which led the post-freedom, led independent India, that after a certain point of time, their energies sort of, they ran out of energy they had, and you got then the BJP, the Jansangh at that point of time, come and take increasingly space. So I'm not going to do an analysis of what went wrong, because I think that's a wrong way of looking at it. Different countries, you can see similar things have happened. So there was an energy of the national movement, which after a certain point, the political parties, political forces ran out of that. And a lot of places the right came back.
Yeah, but how did we run out of that steam? Because, for example, Nehru started Vigyan Mandirs, like temples of science, but it did not, take off that much. Now the NDA has stopped even funding it. Like they have cut the fund in the budget. and Vigyan Mandirs have practically, but even before that they were kind of dysfunctional. So I think like my doubt is like whether the secular or the progressive sections have not done enough in terms of educating the people about that.
One way of looking at it is always that we didn't do enough. Yes, of course, we didn't do enough. They succeeded, we didn't. That's a futile debate, because you can't go back in the past and do something. Okay.
True.
So the question for you, just as it was for my generation, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Not what I didn't do earlier. As I said, unless you have a time machine, you discover one, you can't go back.
Yeah.
So I think the issue is, what is it they did, and what is it that has led us into the crisis of society which we have? That's, you have to look forward. How do I fight them? Not what did I do wrong. This is the very Indian way of finding what is called, what is the original sin. You could, of course, this you can see also the Christian myth, Adam and Eve, apple.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go back in that mode of saying, what did I do wrong? We did a set of things. There were larger forces at work. The national movement is not confined to India. It has happened in country after country. Western democracies are in a crisis as well.
Yeah.
So we have a larger sweep of history. And that sweep is not whether Nehru's science mandirs continued. Could we have done something? Yes, sure, we could have done something. But the point is, that's over.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, what do we do now?
Yeah, but still, how to approach the traditions? Like, for example,
No, that's a different question, how to approach the
epics,
tradition.
Ramayana, Mahabharata, they still have a kind of hold over the people. How to, at the same time, they have hierarchical and regressive values are also in them. So how to should we appropriate them? Should we reject them? These kind of questions
There is no simple answer to this question. You can neither reject them nor appropriate them. You see, the myths, the mythology that exists in the people will exist in the people. The question is, rejection and appropriation both are wrong. You have to understand in the context they were written. So you said, why were these things there? What was the things that were happening at that time? You go back into history. How do you analyze this history? And said, in that history, these were the things. So in that history, was Ram a great person? Yes. Okay, you can talk about it. But is it also true that Ram did a lot of things which are wrong? That's why you have so many Ramayanas. Okay, so you can talk about that. You need not talk about that. You can talk about whatever you want. But say you have to have an analytical view of history. Instead of looking at the epic, let's look at the society in which this epic existed. That is a historical analysis which you have to do. Otherwise, you'd be lazy. See, discussing literature, which is what the great epics are, is you can discuss it in literature. But you can also say that it reflected a certain kind of history and social forces. Let us analyze what those forces were at that time. And then you get into history, a scientific outlook towards history, and analyzing that. Now, that is a terrain which is more useful than saying, should we reject the Ramayana or should we appropriate it? Both will be wrong. It won't work.
Yes. True. But in order to engage with the people, we definitely need some spaces to intervene. For example, even though we definitely there is a, for example, when NCRT books are edited, or when there is some kind of communal portions are introduced in them, there is strong resistance. But at the same time, if you look at the educational infrastructure, the right wing has a huge presence there already. They have this Saraswati Shishu Mandirs and all, and they teach whatever they want there. For example, they make children demolish a structure of Babri Masjid, reenacting the scenes of Ayodhya and things like that. And the presence of secular or progressive forces in that kind of area, like in terms of maybe it was considered as charity and not a solution. So there should be public funded education. That was there. But that kind of interventions, like for making spaces for the people, I think.
I'm not looking backward.
Okay.
I don't want you to start saying, oh, we should have done this, we should have done that. That's a kind of thinking I'm against. Because that could become breast beating. Oh, we failed because. This is not the issue. Challenges of the future. What do you want to do? Do you want to build schools? Go ahead and build them. Okay, do you want to change the curriculum? Fight about it? Do that. Say, Saraswati Shishu Mandirs, they teach a lot of things. I was in a Catholic school, we had moral science, which was really teaching differently Christian theology. And it made me a rebel.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you get both. It is not that anybody who goes to them comes out as in a mold. You get rebels from there. It is the larger societal movements that determine what people will do and not do. It's not simply what few people can do in teaching in school children, that by demolishing the Babri Masjid, they in a certain era they will produce more rebels, in a certain era they will produce more conformist people. It's the outside environment that we have to look at. If you can raise the value of questioning and analysis, a more coherent analysis of the past, then you have a hope.
Yeah,
If you can't do that, well, too bad. You haven't done your work.
yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, I'm looking at history. For instance, history books.
Yeah.
Technology is missing. So we are materialists. Why is technology missing? Even from progressive history books. So that's a task we have to do. Okay? So an alternate history is not to critique what they're doing, is to create your narrative. And that's what, if you want to say you're a historical materialist, well, you have to create materials for historical materials. And if you can't do that, too bad. So our focus should not be what they're doing, let's learn from them. No, our focus should be what is it that we can do today that will creatively engage the next generation. And that task is a more creative one. And as long as you are not engaging yourself on that creative task, we are on a downward spiral of saying, oh, we didn't do this, oh, they did this. This to me is only disarming you.
That is, that is very true, that positive spirit. And that's something which I always wanted to ask you while I was watching the videos like of you being arrested, taken to jail and all. You were always retaining that smile in your face, and that was, I always like, I used to think like I should ask him when I meet him, like, how do you manage to do that?
I was sure that they would fail, and I was going to beat any adversity with a smile. Okay, I had gone to jail under Mrs. Gandhi's emergency as well, and therefore, I think yes, it's a test of your politics and your commitment, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world, so you shouldn't treat it like that. And I was, as I said, I was always hopeful. Okay, they can put me away for some time, but not for too long. And that came out. In fact, I think I came out earlier than I had calculated. I thought I'd be ill for a longer period because UAPA is difficult to get bail, as you know. But the point that I'm making is, I'm only one person in the movement. If today you are arrested, well, sure. Anybody who wants to change society will find certain problems. You'll be facing some attacks. Your generation, I think, has it too easy. Okay.
Maybe.
So you have to think of that these are, if you want to change society, it is through struggle, both intellectual and other struggles that you have to get yourself into. So in my old age, my struggle was to show a model of what could be done using cheap instruments of producing videos. So how to make video editing cheap, how to make cameras cheap, what are the things we could do. Now, of course, it's quite widespread. People use cheap cameras, they use their cell phones, and now you can take pretty good videos with the cell phones as well. So all of this is much more into public domain. So I don't think I have to do anything further on this. It's already there. But nevertheless, what story you tell, I think that's the important part.
And that was one line you said. Many people actually, while they were sharing the pics of your release from Tihar, they shared this line also. This is a long fight. That was that one-liner that many people have shared. So what did you mean by that? It could be interpreted in various ways.
I think there are various interpretations of it, and I meant it in all the ways you're interpreting. It's a personal fight is also going to be long, it's not going to be short. But also we have a much longer fight if we want to change society and currently beat back the kind of attacks which are there on our values of both the nation and respect for the people. Respect for the people irrespective of their caste, religion or other identities. I think that battle will always be what will energize us. And it is that battle through which you have to defeat the ideology we are facing. Different ideologies we are facing. Whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Europe, whether it is in Latin America, Africa or in India. And of course, we also have to be internationalists. We cannot forget what's happening in Gaza right now.
So what about the recent election results? That is the last question I'll be asked. So how do you look at the recent election results? Does it give any, is it particularly energizing, empowering? Or?
I think it puts both sides on notice. It also makes clear the Indian people cannot be fooled too long. You can maybe fool people, some people for some time, but not all people for all time as it is said. And I think this election showed that in spite of all the money power the ruling party had, and election bonds are now in public domain, and the power of the instruments that were there, ED, Income Tax Department, UAPA, police, various cases which are launched. In spite of all that, the people of this country, more than the opposition parties, people of this country showed that they were not happy with what was happening. They did not reject the ruling party, that is true, but they also cut them down to size. And I think that is important, that they have given a message that this mode of ruling, the way the state power has been used, the way opposition has been denied spaces, the way the poverty in this country has increased, meaning the distance between the rich and poor have grown enormously. The fact that people's basic needs are sought to be met through, okay, some amount of things you get from ration and so on. But jobs are not there. Or if jobs are there, they're really jobs which are transient. You get dehadi, what is called, get daily wages. And that also you have not only any surety of it continuing, but the amount you get is also not sufficient for your needs. So all of this, what people have said from British Raj to now billionaire Raj, that all of this has now been something which has been put on the table by the people. And I think to that extent, it's a lesson to the ruling parties. They cannot take the people for granted. It's also a notice to us that we need to organize ourselves better in order to be able to channelize the anger of the people and also what are the kind of messages they would like to hear and what's the action they would like us to take if the opposition came to power. And the opposition at this point of time, yes, it is heterogeneous, but nevertheless there is a core to it which rejects the values which the right wing in this country has been presenting to us for some time. So I think we have a lot to think about on this, but yes, the people have shown there is space for the opposition parties as well, which is 400 Par slogan has been not only rejected, but they've cut down their majority significantly.
Yes.
So we are on notice, they are on notice. It's
Both,
how we shape up.
Message for
how
both
we shape
sections.
up. How we shape up that really is going to answer this question. And I have faith that the Indian people will not let the democratic space that they have created for themselves shrink, and that they will not allow any party to take away from them. That's a message they have left to the ruling party in this case.
Okay, thank you. I think on that note we can conclude. Thanks a lot for your time and investment.
Thank you very much for letting me speak for so long.
Thank you.
Okay.